Good morning, everyone. We're into the seventh day, and it's the second session of phase one. And I think we left last night with the discussion with Mr. Askander. And Mr. Askander was explained to you if you have any questions of clarification of this particular witness who is available to you now. Do you have any questions?
Yes, yes, I do have some questions.
Remember, you're not in a position of opposition to this particular witness. Yours questions now are more clarification. Okay.
Okay. As long as you can determine, yes, sir. What? As long as you're determining limiting my questions, I can ask him any question I want. Why it's
You're
only
not, Mr. Would you go ahead and ask your questions? You're not in cross-examination per se. You seem to be of like interest, and he's hired by the organization to which you belong, I believe. So go ahead. Nope. Oh, I'm sorry. You're not a member. Go
so
ahead.
I didn't understand what you were saying. I'm not in the organization. No, I'm not in his organization.
Okay. Ask your questions.
Okay, Mr. Lee, good morning.
Morning.
Mr. Lee, you said you were involved since like 2016. Is that correct?
I cannot remember exactly. It was the first time I saw the sign of Yonge MCD post at Yonge and Brookside Road at the corner. Basically on the side, they specified they will build 1,180 units, I think for that lot. I cannot remember exactly. It is around 2016. I believe the fall of 2016, but I cannot remember exactly.
Yeah, it's fine. It's fine. We did connect, didn't we? Several times in face and through emails.
You mean you and me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. You had a group with you, and you prepared at the time what was called the coordinated presentation to the town of Richmond Hill. Do you remember this?
Yes.
Okay. So you had some concerns. Can you tell us what were the concerns for this consolidated presentation to the town?
I cannot remember exactly that, like 3 years ago. I believe we have a coordinated speech for 8 residents together because the town limited each resident can only speak 5 minutes, but we have more content to speak. We have no choice but to form a resident group to talk about our concerns. I believe first is the traffic. Also has the park issues, traffic, and also has, that's pretty much, I think, the traffic regarding the road, the layout, the problem, the traffic accidents at the Yonge and the Mills corners. Basically, that's probably I remember that's a 28-page speech content. I composed the raw materials, and another local resident, also a lawyer, polish it. So if you want, I can pull out that.
No, it's fine. It's fine. It's fine. You, if you recall, you did send me this and told me I could use it. If you recall that.
Yes, I remember. Yes.
Okay. Did any of the concerns got addressed by the town at the time?
Basically, they ignored everything.
Okay. What did you feel? Do you remember the day of November 27th when the secondary plan and bylaw was adopted?
Yes.
How did you feel that day?
Personally, I don't agree with the original one because the density. I did a lot of research, as I specified yesterday. Even the old one, the density is still very high. in compared to all the neighbors, also the history. That's why I'm opposed to the density side. But compared to the revision plan, that one much more reasonable in compared to the latest one. I think just published, just released this, I believe this May or April. That one I think is much more reasonable because that one, the height is only 15 stories. Right now, no limit. Theoretically, you can go up to 60 or 70 stories. So this is much worse. Remember, during the past 3 years, nothing changed, except the council has 2 licensed realtors join the Richmond Hill Council. That's the only change. That's the only motivation for the revision plan. Nothing else. The provincial didn't change the policy. Yonge region didn't change the policy. The road infrastructure, no change. The only change is the politics. That's why I believe the revision plan is politic order.
Okay. Let's go back to that day. So at that time, you still did have concerns regarding traffic and density. Was that right? November 27th, 2017?
Yes, main concern, yes.
Okay. Do you remember when you asked to become party at the LPAT?
I cannot remember exactly. I think that's probably during the 2nd or 3rd LPAT meetings. So I cannot remember exactly.
Okay. Do you remember if it was before the election or after the election?
I cannot remember exactly.
Okay. Well, I do remember. If you recall, I did ask you to come and ask to become party at the LPAT. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Okay. Your traffic consultant didn't have any issues with the 2017 BA report. Do you know that?
Because that's a professional job, I didn't involve that part.
He's your consultant, so you must know his stand.
Yes, we hired a consultant, but we respect their, I think, conclusions. The presentation I did yesterday is my, I think, based on my research.
Okay, great. But it's mostly planning when you consider densities and people and jobs per hectare. That's mostly planning issues, isn't it?
I used to dig into details for the traffic, for example, how to calculate the traffic generation rate, something like that. At the very beginning, later I realized it involved too much professional details. They have too many variables because I'm not a trained traffic engineer. Later I gave up. I do more on the high level to compare, basically part to part, apple to apple comparison. For example, we planned, let's say 420 residents per hectare, right? I found a comparable region in the other location, for example, Yonge. I want to see what the traffic infrastructure that area has. In this case, we can compare. For example, after 20 years or 30 years, do we have the facility same as Yonge and Bloor right now? And then we can get a conclusion. In this case, it's more acceptable. If we do assumption for the future, because I have no license, my conclusion will not be accepted. That's why I can only use the fact in the past. That's why those numbers are more trustable. That's why I can't do any future projection because that's involved, I think, basically the credibility of your data.
So, you know, everything you presented yesterday could be dismissed by the board because it didn't come from an expert witness. Do you know that?
I have no comment. I don't know.
Mr. Chair, I object to that question.
Another question.
Okay, another question.
You have help us.
Yes, it will help. It will help, sir. It will. You remember the case of Yonge MCD? You just indicated that you were involved with the number of units in there, 1,108 units. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Yes. But you still, last year, accepted settlement for double the density in that area, didn't you?
Yes, we accept the agreement, basically let's see, the deal, because that's compromise solutions. First, I think we are local residents. We have no enough financial support to get professional, I think, like traffic engineer or planners. That's number one. Number two is also the city support that plan. So if I think for residents, if we I think try to against both, it's very difficult. That's why we accept that deal.
Do you know that it was double the density required under the Richmond Hill official plan 2010?
Yes, probably more. It's not I think double.
Okay.
As I calculate, that's probably also belong to high density. Even that's probably density for downtown, probably for downtown Toronto.
Great.
Not double. Not
Okay.
double.
Okay, even more than double. That's great. But you didn't revise or ask to lower the parking density for that area.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I'm now going to jump in. I've allowed the questions to go forward, but that's a matter that's done. Mr. Iskander did not oppose. Mr. Cherniak, on behalf of his client, did not oppose, and you have a decision from the tribunal. And I think the cross-examination ought to be confined to, or the questioning ought to be confined to the evidence that was called yesterday in relation to the matters before you today.
Yep. Okay.
First, I did
help Mr. Askander and deal with the issues that we have to deal with. Okay.
Just to clarify, I did oppose, but I didn't have.
But that's in the past. That's the past.
That would be all, sir.
Oh, okay. Thank you. The order agreed upon. Now you.
I don't think the rest of it was agreed upon, at least as far as Mr. Streisfield is concerned, but I would expect that if he has any questions, he would go next in terms of the overall sequence. I believe he actually showed up and is monitoring from the committee room next door.
Oh,
I have no questions, sir.
okay. No questions then. Okay, Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
Mr. Lee, good morning.
Morning.
So, Mr. Lee, in your evidence, you indicated you reside at 206 Brookside Road, correct?
Yes.
And that's just outside of the KDA?
Depends on how, that's about 900 meters to the centers of the KDA.
Okay, so I'm just going to put up a map that might be of some assistance. Okay, do you see that on the screen?
Yes.
All right, thank you. And Mr. Chair, I'm just going to ask for this map to be marked as an exhibit because it's not a document in the record yet. We could call it map of surrounding area to Yonge Bernard KDA. All right, Mr. Lee, do you see this blue circle over here?
Yeah.
Is that roughly the location of your property?
Can you zoom more?
Unfortunately, it doesn't zoom.
Is that Brookside Road?
That's Brookside Road right here.
Yeah, probably maybe a little close to Yonge. That's but very close enough.
Okay, so you'd agree with me that I actually did a Google search on this through York Maps, and 206 Brookside is identified as this location right here.
Yeah.
All right. So and the KDA, it's down here, isn't it? Right south of this stream corridor, and this is Yonge Street.
Actually,
you understand that?
If you go up, see a figure. Go up. Go in.
Yeah.
Go north. Go north.
It's an Mr. Lee, it's an image, so I can't actually go anywhere beyond what's shown on the screen. But you'd agree with me that this is the location of the KDA roughly where my hand is pointing?
Mr. Chair, can I ask what street that is that's being pointed at?
That's Yonge Street.
No, the cross street.
I'm not pointing at the cross street. I'm pointing at the stream corridor right there.
I am asking where on Yonge Street this is, Mr. Chair.
It's north of Elgin Mills, south of Gamble Road, right where the stream corridor is.
Well, you're attempting to point to where the KDA is, and I'd like you
South-
to be
So this here is Brookside.
right.
That's south of Brookside.
Okay.
All right. And that's the
Yeah.
stream corridor. And I'm asking
Yeah,
the
yeah.
witness to confirm that's the location of the KDA.
Approximately, yes.
All right. So, and you'd agree with me that from your property to Yonge Street, that's about 600 meters?
No, more than that.
More than that. Okay. How
Yeah.
many meters is it to Yonge Street?
That's probably 900 meters.
900 meters to Yonge Street. And then when I get to Yonge Street in Brookside and I come south to the northerly limit of the KDA, how many meters is that?
Probably 300 meters.
All right. So you're over a kilometer away from the northerly limit of the KDA, correct?
Remember, Yonge MCD is at the southwest corner of Yonge and Brookside.
I understand there are Yonge MCD lands that are outside of the KDA. My
But
question
also
is,
part of the KDA.
my question is the distance to the northerly limit of the KDA. That's over a kilometer, correct?
To the center of that one.
Mr. Chair, 900 meters is not over a kilometer. Right?
Plus 300 is what was evidence was. So,
You are talking about 300, probably the center.
okay. So your evidence is it's over a kilometer to the center of the KDA. That's your evidence.
I'm still not understanding how 900 meters becomes over a kilometer.
Well, I think Mr. Lee's probably capable of figuring.
No, but he
the
said
distance.
900 meters.
Okay, so he can correct him if he's,
Okay.
So Mr. Chair, his evidence was it was 900 meters to Yonge Street and another 300 meters down on Yonge Street to get to the.
okay,
Remember-
1,200 meters.
Okay, let me see. Because this KDA is not a small block, you are planning 14,000 resident job in that area. Those residents probably equal the
Whoa,
whole
so-
block.
Hold it, whoa,
So,
whoa,
Mr.
Mr. Lee, hang on a minute. We're just getting the distance first.
Yeah. So Mr. Lee, all I'm asking you to confirm is the distance to the northerly limit of the KDA. And I think your evidence was that it's 900 meters along Brookside Road and another 300 meters down on Yonge Street, approximately. And I'm just asking to confirm, is that your evidence? Yes or no?
Goodness.
That's probably to the center.
Okay. So it's your evidence to the center. It's 1,200 meters, correct?
Approximately, yes.
Okay, fair enough. All right, so you said in your evidence yesterday that when you travel south and east, you have to go through the KDA. That was your evidence, correct?
Yes.
All right, and by that, what I understood is you would travel along Brookside Road, east.
Yeah.
You'd come south on Yonge Street.
No,
And
no,
then
no.
you'd-
Cross. Go to Yorkland.
Oh, you'd come down to Yorkland,
And then, bypass,
and then
Going
you'd
down.
come south on Yorkland.
and then go east from Egg Mills. I
All
try
right.
to
So in
avoid-
effect, you're bypassing the KDA through that route, aren't you?
But if KDA build, that's the east boundary of KDA. Right
East
now,
boundary.
Right now, because the traffic on Yonge too much, I avoid it.
Mr. Lee, do you want to wait for the questions? Hang on. Mr. Cherniak will have re-examination if there's clarification.
All right, Mr. Lee. So you can come down Yorkland. You agree with me that one option also is you could come down Yonge Street. You may not take that route, but you could do that, correct?
I could, because of traffic, I avoid it.
Right. And similarly, you could come down Brookside Road going east, and you could go north on Yonge Street out to Gamble Road, 19th Avenue, correct? And you could head east. That's a routing option.
That's waste. Usually I go south. I very few time go north. That's basically waste a lot, I think, kilometers and time.
You'd agree with me that the distance from Brookside Road to Gamble 19th Avenue and the distance from Brookside Road down to Elgin Mills are about the same, aren't they?
Yeah, approximately, yes.
Right. So I understand your evidence. You wouldn't go up to 19th Avenue, but you have to admit that it is a potential routing option, not one that you want to take, but one that someone could take.
But that's trend. I go south, go east. Why should I go north?
All right.
That's totally, I think, not relevant. If you go Toronto, why should you go New Market, right?
Mr. Lee, it's okay. Don't argue. Just answer the questions as best you can and you give your opinion.
Okay, my answer is no. It's not an option go north.
Okay.
All right, understood. And if you work in Mississauga, correct?
Yes.
Right. And when you travel to Mississauga, you go west on Brookside Road, is that right?
Yes. Yes.
All right. And when you're going west on Brookside Road, you're not going through the KDA, are you?
No.
No. And in fact, when you get out to Brookside Road, then what do you do? Do you go off this street here? Is this called Shaftesbury?
Yes.
The street here? And
yes.
Right. And so you could go north on Shaftesbury out to Bathurst?
Usually I go south, go down to Egg Mills.
All right. So you can.
That's more convenient.
Right. So you can go down, but if there was, for example, a road closure on Shaftesbury down here, you could go west on Shaftesbury out to Bathurst Road as well, right? That's another option, isn't it?
Yes.
All right. So you agree with me that there's more than one routing option here in terms of traveling around between Bathurst, Yonge Street, Yorkland, correct?
Can you repeat?
So my question is, there's more than one routing option. See, there's more than one series of roads you can take to get to a particular destination, correct?
But go to east and south, very limited. Go west, yes.
Right. And we've heard your evidence on going east. Yeah, you said you would go down to Elgin Mills Road via Yorkland. You wouldn't take the path up to 19th Avenue, but would you recognize that another person who had a preference to do so could?
Because I'm a normal person. I'm not going to that, I think, far. If I go downtown Toronto, I go New Market first and then go another way. To me, I'm a normal person. I won't do that.
If Yorkland was closed and you couldn't go south on Yorkland, and say there was traffic in your view on Yonge Street going south, could you then go up north to 19th Avenue?
That's a nightmare.
Okay. So you went to a number of statistics in your evidence, and I believe they're in your witness statement as well, correct?
Yes.
All right. So I'm just going to take you to those statistics. Can you see those on the screen?
Yes.
All right. And these were the statistics that were appended to the staff report?
No, this is not the statistics. This is basically the calculation from the city. This is not statistics.
Right. Hey, but did you rely on the information in here as it relates to, for example, the developable size of the area?
Yes, because the developer size, I cannot decide. I must get from the planner.
Right. So you understand that the entire KDA is 26.78 hectares?
Based on the city provide data, yes.
Right. And you've identified the developable land size as 21.53 hectares, right?
Based on city data, yes.
All right. And you have no evidence to indicate that information is incorrect, correct?
Yes.
All right. And you know in your evidence that the planned residents and jobs is 11,300 residents and 300 jobs, correct?
Mhm.
All right, but at least looking at this forecasted model, you can see that it's actually 10,672 residents and 2,996 jobs, right?
Usually they round up because since the KDA plan, the city probably released like at least 4 or 5, I think, proposals. They never give you constant numbers. So they always give you something, I think like this. Today give you 10,000, tomorrow give you 10,500. But this one, I based on the report, the official, I think the official KDA plan, that give you the number. That's more trustable, yes.
All right, so but you recognize those are the numbers that are on this forecast document, correct?
Can you zoom? Can you zoom?
Let me take a look if I can. Here you go. Does that help?
Yes.
All right. And so you see the number here, 10,672 for residents, 2,996 for jobs, correct?
No, that one also, let me see, maybe.
Yeah.
That probably also have to include some other, for example, institute. Did they include the institute residents and the townhouse residents?
So my question, Mr. Lee, is just simply whether that is the number that's on the page here for the total
Yes.
of residents.
Yes.
And I think your answer is yes.
Mhm.
And then you'd agree with me that the number here for residents and jobs per hectare that's identified is 510, correct?
Based on this table, yes.
Right. And so it's not 534 or 664 as you've identified in your witness statement and in your oral testimony, correct?
It depends on, because I use those city release data, because this one, because remember, first I found, I think the priority. First, I found from the KDA plan because of the high priority. This reference documents, because on those KDA plan, they didn't give out the KDA size, the developer land size. That's why next I go to this one. So that's I take the higher sequence, let's say most trustable documents as a first priority to get data.
All right, so you recognize the number here is 510, but you're assuming a higher number because you've read somewhere else a higher number. Is that right?
No, I based on the more trustable official document. That's official, this is just reference.
So on what official document?
The KDA plan has resident numbers and jobs.
And you're telling me in the KDA plan, there's a number that says that there's 600 residents or 634 residents and jobs per hectare. Is that your evidence?
Can you go to the, I think the, let me see. Can you go to the official plan, the KDA official plan? I will point out to you. I believe the second page of the KDA plan.
And just bear with me, I'm just opening it up.
Okay, no problem. Actually, this is one of the argument. The city tried to hide those, I think, critical information. Yeah, this page, the bottom.
All right. And you see, and so what you're pointing to here is the 10,600 to 11,300 people's and employment of approximately 1,500 to 3,000. That's what
Yeah.
you're pointing to, correct? And
Yes.
you recognize there's no density figure here, correct?
Yeah, because the city didn't print it. I believe that number is a short number. City doesn't want to release it. And also city hide the land size in this KDA plan. They should include. That's why I cannot find those KDA size. I have to go to reference documents.
All right, so I'm going to take you now to the growth plan. And you relied on these policies, right, in your evidence?
Yes, as my reference.
All right. And in all right, and Mr. Lee, so we're looking at policy 2.2.4, 3 sub B, and you recognize there's a minimum target here of 160 residents and jobs combined per hectare for those areas served by bus rapid transit, right?
Yes.
All right. And that's a minimum target, isn't it?
Yes.
All right. And are you aware that in the growth plan, there's also policy that says that the minimum intensification and density targets in this plan, including alternative targets, have been permitted by the minister, or minimum standards, and municipalities are encouraged to go beyond these minimum targets? Are you aware of that?
Yes, I'm aware.
All right. And so there is a direction from the province that, notwithstanding that there's a minimum 160, you should go beyond 160, right?
Yes.
All right. And in fact, isn't that what York Region did? Because York Region, in its draft MTSA planning exercise, identified 200 residents and jobs per hectare for the Bernard MTSA, correct?
Yes.
All right, and that's the MTSA in which the KDA is found, correct?
Yes.
All right, and would you agree with me that what the region is doing is actually delineating the boundaries of an MTSA?
What do you mean? Can you repeat?
They're identifying the limits of the MTSA, the geographic boundaries of it. Do you agree with that?
Yes, basically, I think the regional just detail the provincial requirements. They based on York region population and employment growth target. They assign the density for each MTSA. For this MTSA is 200.
Right. So I'm just going to turn to the actual MTSA document. So it's right here. Sorry.
Not this one, 43. Is that the ID is 43 for this KDA. Going down, going down.
Thank you.
I spent over 1,000 hours studying those documents. So I know this one, I think probably as good as anyone.
All right, thank you, Mr. Lee. And this is it right here, right?
Yes.
Okay, so in the absence, because you recognize that the region hasn't actually got an approved delineation of the MTSA. This red line that's going around this isn't approved today, correct?
Yes.
It's in draft form.
Actually, it's not really, right now still in the draft stage.
Yeah, and so you're agreeing with me on that. And you recognize that in the absence of that, then what applies based on the definition of what an MTSA is either a circle of either 500 meters or 800 meters, correct?
No, 800 meters apply to higher level of MTSA. For example, urban growth centers and those like a mobility anchor hub or gateway hubs, not apply to this bus station. This bus station only 500 meters. Someone try to mislead the public, 500 only for this small bus station.
So you disagree that the definition of a major transit station area in the growth plan includes, as part of the definition, that it is the area which is approximately 500 to 800 meter radius of a transit station representing a 10-minute walk. Do you disagree that that's the definition, or do you agree that that's the definition?
No, that's not. You misleading. Let me explain. 500 to 800, because MTSA has different levels. For example, York region, the York, I think.
Answer the questions
Okay.
reasonably.
Okay. For example, the Richmond Hill City Center at the Heavy 7 and Yonge, that one is a high level, it's an urban growth center. So those areas apply to 800 meters because the radiation of the subway station can basically affect more areas. For bus station is less, that's why only 500 meters apply.
Okay, so Mr. Lee, I just want to show you, I'm looking at the growth plan here. It's in Exhibit 1. Here's the definition for a major transit station area. Do you see that?
Yes.
All right. And do you see where it says major transit station areas are generally defined as the area within approximate 500 to 800 meter radius of a transit station representing about a 10-minute walk?
Can you tell me, is Yonge border at KDA same as Union Station? Union Station, the coverage.
Mr. Lee, do you want to just try to answer the question? And Mr. Cherniak can certainly help you out in the reexamination.
Okay.
So Mr. Lee, my question is very simple. There's a definition on the page from the growth plan of what an MTSA is. Do you agree that definition includes that it's an area approximate 500 to 800 meter radius of a transit station representing about a 10-minute walk? Do you agree that that's part of the definition? It's in front of you, Mr. Lee.
Approximately, remember, yes.
All right, thank you. Okay, so I just want to go back to this. And you appreciate that this drawing only shows the 500 meter radius, correct? The 800 meter radius is not shown on here.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a yes?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Okay, so let's start with the 500 meter radius. This area here, you see where my cursor is pointing?
Mm-hmm.
That's low density residential, isn't it?
Yes.
Single family housing?
Yes.
What about up here? Is that single family housing as well?
I think so, yes.
Yeah, what about over here? Single family housing? In this
Yes.
area here?
Yes, yes.
All right. And you'd agree with me that for these areas here, the density wouldn't be 200 residents and jobs per hectare, correct?
Probably even less.
A lot less, right?
I will say approximately, because I didn't check.
All right. Would you agree that it could be, say, 30 or 40
I cannot
residents or
agree,
jobs? Okay.
except you can give me the numbers. Did
All
you count?
So, but what you would agree is it's substantially less.
Yes.
All right. So if it's substantially less here, and I need to have 200 within the entire circle, isn't it the case that I need to be higher here to compensate for the lower number here? So
Actually, no, it's not, because you totally misunderstood how York region plan those MTSAs. They based on the assigned boundary and then assign the density and then get a 3/4 million by 2041. You totally misunderstood how York region plan these MTSAs. That's not as you explained.
okay, so
I'm
if
an engineer.
Mr. Lee, if I have a circle and I need within the circle to have a density of 200 residents and jobs per hectare, and that circle has a defined area, let's just say it's 10
Can you go
square.
bottom? Can you go bottom of this page? I will show you. Can you bottom?
Mr. Lee, wait for the question.
So,
No, you are
Miss-
not. That's not right. Not correct.
okay, Mr. Lee, my question is simply this. I've got a circle. Assume it's, for this hypothetical example, 10 square kilometers, okay? Or 10, say 1 square kilometer. And let's assume within that 1 square kilometer, 300 meters squared is low density residential. And let's say it's 50 residents and jobs per hectare. In the remainder of my space, my number needs to be bigger than 200 to average out, doesn't it?
Actually, basically, you confuse MTSA with that 500 meters. 500 meters means it's possible we take the land from this 500 meter as MTSA, but the York region define MTSA based on the real situation. For example, what's the zoning code for this one? So that's why they have a boundary, not just a circle. Remember, they only specify within the boundary, the density is 200 or 300 or 160, not that circle. Remember, not that circle. They never use that circle.
Mr. Kahar, do you want to grab hold?
Yeah. So
Back on track?
So Mr. Lee, forget the circle. let's look at the draft boundary.
Mhm.
You agree that that is a draft boundary for the MTSA, correct?
Yes.
That's what York Region is identifying.
Yes.
And York Region is saying within this area, this entire area here,
Mhm.
you have to have an average density, or you have to have a minimum density target of 200 residents and jobs per hectare in this entire area. You agree with
Yes.
that, right?
Yes.
And you agree with me that this entire area is not the Young Bernard KDA, right?
Yeah, on that, but Bernard KDA is only 40% approximately.
40%. Well, actually, didn't you tell me, look right here, 63 hectares,
Yeah.
this whole
We
area,
have a 26,
26. So that's about what?
40 or 41%, I can tell you.
40%. All right. So 60% of the land is not even part of, is not part of the KDA. That's this MTSA, right?
Yes.
All right. So I need to get 200, minimum 200 over this entire area.
Mhm.
I look up here. This is not part of the MTSA, correct? The area just south of Brookside, because here is again the stream corridor. That's how I identify the northerly
Yeah.
limit. Are you aware that this is townhouse development?
Yes.
Right, and that wouldn't be at a minimum of 200 residents and jobs per hectare? That would be lower, wouldn't it?
Yes, right now it's low. It's much low.
Right. So isn't it the case that if I've got lower density areas within this defined MTSA that's in draft form?
Actually, I already understand what you want to ask. Let
Mr.
me answer your
Lee,
question.
Mr.
I
Lee,
answer your
can I
question right
complete
now.
my question, please?
Mr. Lee,
Mhm.
let him complete the question and understand before you answer.
Okay, go ahead.
All right. So Mr. Lee, if I've got lower densities here, don't I need higher densities in this area in order to
Absolutely.
compensate for the lower
Yes.
density here?
Yes, absolutely.
Right. So what ends up happening in this defined draft MTSA area is you may have pockets that have higher density, and then you may have pockets that have lower density. But over the
Yes.
entire MTSA boundary, you're going to have 200 in residents and jobs per hectare, because you may have, for example, 500 in one area, and you may have 50 in another. Isn't that true?
Some area zero. Yes.
Right. And so when you look at the KDA, the number here, you've calculated 600. We say it's 500, but it's certainly in all cases above 200. I think we can agree on that, correct?
No, actually, because you didn't do the math. Later, I will show you the math. Okay,
All right.
I will give you a
So-
calculation.
So, Mr.
Exactly.
Lee, are you or are you not agreeing with me that the number within the KDA is over 200? It is. Wait, it is. It's over 200, right, within the KDA?
Yes, it's within 12. Yes, correct.
Right, right. But areas outside of the KDA, but within the MTSA, are below 200. You've
Right
also
now,
already
yes.
agreed with that, yes.
Yes.
So when you plan over the entire area, you could have a higher number in here and a lower number out here, and overall achieve a 200 residents and jobs per hectare, correct?
Yes, sounds correct. Later, I will tell you. I will explain to you later. Okay.
All right, I'm gonna take you to the staff report.
Oh no. Stop on that page. I still need to use it. I will tell you why you are wrong.
Mr. Lee,
Mhm.
you're answering questions. Stick to that.
Because right now,
Mr. Lee, listen for the next question.
You
Your counsel will look after you in re-examination. Do you
Okay.
have that understood?
Okay, sorry.
Okay, so Mr. Lee, we're looking at the staff report from May 13, 2020. Do you see that on the screen?
Mhm.
Thank you. And I'm just gonna go down to the staff report. And you see here on this page, that's the 500 meter and 800 meter radius for an MTSA. Do you see that?
Mhm.
Okay. And in the absence of a delineated MTSA, those are the rough boundaries of an MTSA, correct? based on the
That's-
definition we went to earlier
That's
on?
a study area. To be honest, that's a study area, not MTSA. That's
Okay.
study area.
Okay. And I want to take you to this paragraph in particular. Now, you see here staff is recognizing estimated gross density of 510 residents and jobs per hectare at full built out within the proposed 26.8 hectare area of the KDA. That's what staff is saying the KDA's density is going to be at full build out in 2041, correct?
This print is correct. Yes. Let me.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's staff's number. I appreciate your number is a bit higher, but that's staff's number. And I think you're acknowledging that's what staff is saying. in the report.
Actually, for this staff number, if you use the 510 times 26.8, you got a 13,700 resident jobs. That's different with the KDA plan. You short of, let me see, this different seven. That's
I think
you short of.
Okay, so-
Mr. Lee, the question was fairly straightforward. You can get back later.
Okay.
All right. So Mr. Lee, you do recognize that there's this, that staff are saying it's 510 within the KDA, correct?
This report, basically this
It's
document. Yes,
Mr. Lee, it's a
not-
simple yes or no.
Yes.
All right. Thank you. So then you see when we read on, it says when considering the 500 and 800 meter radii of the BRT station, this density along with the planned development along Yonge Street corridor, the remaining MTS area, and within areas designated neighborhoods, so those are the low density areas, would become 220 residents and jobs per hectare and 140 residents and jobs per hectare respectively. You see that?
Yes, I see it.
Right. So what staff is saying is if you look at the whole 500 meter area, you have the 510 within the smaller area, that's the KDA. You have the lower density outside of it that is still within the MTSA. You average that all out. And if that circle is 500 meters, you get 220 residents and jobs per hectare. And if it's 800 meters, you get 140 residents and jobs per hectare, correct?
Correct. If you use Richmond Hill, that number will even go down.
Right. And you've previously agreed with me that the provincial direction is a minimum of 160 for the MTSA, not the KDA, correct? The direction in the provincial in the growth plan is a minimum 160 for the major transit station area. That's the larger area, correct?
Yes.
Right. And then the direction in the regional documents is a minimum of 200, again, for the major transit station area, not the KDA. The larger area has to be a minimum of 200, correct?
Not a minimum. That's the target, not a minimum. That's target.
Okay, so I understand your evidence, it's a target. Assume you're right. It has to be a target of 200, correct?
Mm-hmm.
All right, and you see here, what is actually achieved is 220 and 140.
Later, I will explain. We have different definitions. Okay.
All right. All right, and you went in your evidence to the York Region intensification targets, and I think your evidence was that there are 16 MTSAs, and so there's lots of places to direct the intensification. Is that sort of a rough high-level summary of your evidence on that point?
Yes.
All right, but you'd agree with me that within the urban hierarchy for Richmond Hill, there is the Richmond Hill Center. That's number one place for intensification, correct?
Yes.
Right. And then we've got Yonge and 16th, KDA, number two place for intensification, correct?
Yes. 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 Correct.
Right. And then we've got the Yonge and Bernard KDA, where we are.
Yeah.
Right.
Richmond Hill only 3 KDA. Yes.
Right. And that's notwithstanding there's 16 MTSAs. The focus of where we're going to send intensification is those 3 areas. That's what the official plan says. That's what's approved today. Yes or no?
Yes, but Yonge region just released a new one, remember?
Yes, and you're talking about the draft delineated MTSA boundaries. That's what you're talking about when you say that, correct?
Yeah, the density, yes.
All right. Okay, and I noted you went in your evidence to the Yonge-Eglinton secondary plan, and I think your purpose there was to do a comparison of densities there versus the Yonge and Bernard KDA. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, I'm just trying to pull up another document here. So, and I went through your documents that were attached to your witness statement, and you included a copy of the Yonge-Eglinton secondary plan, or at least excerpts from it, right?
Yes.
All right. Were you aware that that version was the adopted version of the plan?
Yeah, that's adopted, yes.
Right. And do you understand that that adopted version has since been modified and approved by the minister? Are you aware of that?
I didn't check. I didn't check.
All right. And I just want to put a new document to you here. And Mr. Chair, I'm going to ask for this document to be marked as an exhibit. It's the Yonge-Eglinton secondary plan as approved by the minister.
Which year version is?
All right. So I want to take you to here to page 6. Thank you. So you see here in 2.4 Midtown transit station areas, that was the area you were comparing, correct?
No, I'm comparing the whole area.
All right, the whole, okay.
Whole KDA, not that area, no density requirements.
Okay, so let's just read this through and then we'll follow through the path, okay? So you see here, it says map 21.3 identifies Midtown transit station areas and their respective boundaries. The boundaries of the Midtown transit station area will include areas within 200 to 500 meter radii of the station. You see that?
Is this, let me clarify, is this middle transit means that Yonge and Eglinton cross section?
Well, maybe if I take you down to here,
Yeah.
2.44.
Yeah, that's more clear. Yes.
Right? Yeah,
Yes.
and it says 600 residents and jobs per hectare for the Yonge-Eglinton transit station area,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
right? And that's one component of the Midtown transit station area.
Yes, but very
Right? 'Cause
small.
Yeah, so there's three of them actually. There's the Yonge-Eglinton, there's the Davisville and Mount Pleasant, and there's the Leaside Chaplin Avenue transit station areas, and they all fit into this thing called Midtown transit station area.
4. Below the C, there's another area, no density. No, just the next paragraph below C. Below C, you can see this.
Yeah.
Individual development within that area. You can see that sentence. You
Thank
have
you.
4 areas.
Whoa.
6.
We'll
Okay,
get there, Mr. Lee.
So Mr. Lee, there's these 3 that are identified here. The one that you were comparing to was the Yonge-Eglinton transit area with a 600 residents and jobs per hectare, right? That was your comparison. In your
I
witness
compare the
statement.
whole KDA, not individual. Whole
Right.
KDA. That's why
Okay.
I see our KDA density higher than this one. Because
All right.
if you calculate the average, it's probably only 300 or even less.
Okay, but you recognize that what's being measured here is the Yonge-Eglinton transit station area, which is
Yeah.
calculated based on a 200 and 500 meter radius, as from the policy I took you to before. And you're comparing that to a KDA, which is a subset of a major transit station area, correct? So you're comparing a thing called an MTSA to a thing called a KDA, and a KDA is a smaller thing or a subset of an MTSA. Is that a fair comparison, Mr. Lee?
Actually, you misunderstood my witness. Basically, I compare Young Bernard KDA plan with the Young Eglinton KDA plan. Basically, it's a plan to plan. It's a whole boundary to whole boundary. It's not individual. You're talking about is a core of Young Eglinton KDA. That is exactly at the cross, Young and Eglinton cross. That has a highway station.
Yes, the answer is no. Is that correct?
Yeah, no, yeah.
All right. And Mr. Lee, I'm going to take you now to the 2016 census analysis you did.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to find that in your document book and put it up. That's page 37. I think I've got the wrong document here.
Yeah, that's correct one, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Mr. Lee, this is your table, and I appreciate you've made some updates to this as well. Is that right?
Can you show that table, please?
Sorry, it's not on the screen. Let me just.
No.
Right here. Do you see it now?
No, this no update, still the same.
Okay, let me.
The update, the Mtsa is not this one. Yeah, this one just before I have a calculation errors. Later I correct errors.
Okay, so this is showing the census areas. This is showing something different. This is showing MTSAs. So
Yeah.
I'm interested in this, the census area analysis.
Okay.
Do you see this?
Yes.
All right. So my first question to you is, there's a lot of areas here that have land area in square kilometers that's bigger than 0.27, right? So we see all these numbers down here, 0.46, 0.42, 0.53, 0.57, and so on, correct?
Yes.
All right. And if I look at any one of those areas, it could be that there's portion of that area that has a higher density and a portion of that area that has a lower density, correct?
Correct.
Right. And if I were to look at the area that has a higher density, couldn't it be the case that my persons and jobs per hectare for that area would be higher?
Yes, if you see number 5 from top down, that's the case you want to mention.
Right. So Mr. Lee, the point I'm putting to you is that depending on what subset of an area you look at, your persons and job hectare could go up or it could go down. Because density isn't uniform. Sorry, go ahead.
You can see here we even count only 4 hectares. The land is only like a 15% as us. They also in this list, not go bigger and also smaller. If you see number 5 in Montreal, if you see number 5, that's only 4 hectares. We have 26 hectares.
Right.
Right.
And Mr. Lee, my point is simply that there are areas here that are larger that have what appear to be lower residents and jobs per hectare numbers. But if you were to look at a subset of that area, and it was the subset that had the higher density, then those numbers could potentially be higher.
But it's difficult higher than us because mathematically I can prove it. But if you get one, I can do a math. But right now I will say we have higher, lower, but this based on states of Canada. I cannot change the areas.
Right. And these areas that are identified, these aren't tied to any land use planning, official plan documents. These aren't neighborhoods per se, are they?
This is called communities. Usually they call communities. Usually I check the definition. They based on approximately a block have 5,000 to 15,000 people. They divide the block. That's approximate. In Canada, we have 5,000 these blocks. Majority fit in that range.
And Mr. Lee, like for example, I noticed there wasn't a geographic code for the planned area that's the Bernard KDA, right? You never included one.
We have, but not exactly as our boundary, but also the density much low, maybe around 2,000 or something. Here
Right.
only 1250, the highest. That's Richmond Hill, the highest only below 300, something like that.
So Mr. Lee, I looked and I'm going to ask you if you agree or disagree with this, but I looked and I identified that the Bernard KDA was actually part of 4 geographic codes. Do you agree with that or disagree with that?
I didn't check, but it's more than one geographic code, yes.
All right, so you agree it's more than one, then I don't think we need to go to them. All right, and you agree that all of these numbers here that you're comparing to, these are all data from 2016. I think you said that in your evidence in chief, right?
Yeah, the top have said this, yes. If you
Right.
go to the top, they
Right.
said 2016. Yeah.
The one exception though is the Bernard KDA, because these numbers here are what you've identified as the projected 2041 numbers, correct?
Yes.
All right, so you're comparing the 2041 numbers for the Bernard KDA against the census numbers for geographic code areas in 2016. Is that right?
I want to compare the infrastructures. I want to see whether in 2041 we have the same infrastructure as this density.
Mr. Lee, so is the answer to that a yes or a no in terms of your comparison?
I just want to compare the numbers, not years.
Okay, so can you just give me an answer whether it's yes or no, and then you can provide your explanation?
Because we have no 2041 data. Yes. Later I'll explain, okay?
Mr. Kahar, could I ask the page number of the table you're looking at?
Sure, that's page 379, Madam Chair, of the YRA's book. Okay, but you would agree with me at least that as it relates to all these 2016, or these areas where you've given 2016 numbers, they're all going to grow as we get closer to 2041, correct? And their respective residence and job numbers will also increase?
Not exactly. For example, St. James Town will drop, not go up. Not exactly. It depends on.
Okay, so there might be some variability, but would you recognize that in the vast majority of these cases, you're going to have instances where resident and job numbers are going to go up because obviously the province is saying, at least for the areas in Ontario, to intensify?
Maybe.
Okay. And Mr. Lee, you went through an analysis in your evidence, and I'm going to make sure I understand this correctly. You basically said, hey, look, city, you identified unit sizes of 1,100 square feet. And I think that those sizes are too large. I think a reasonable number would be 800 square feet for unit sizes. And so because you've picked such a big number that is 1,100, the reality is you can ultimately result in a lot more units because you take those 300 square feet that are in the 11 and developers will use that instead to create more units. Is that sort of just a high level summary of your analysis?
Yes.
And then, right. And in doing that, you do recognize that the H thresholds in the secondary plan, they don't rely on unit numbers by any means, correct? They rely on population and jobs.
No, if you go to, no.
Okay, and so do I need to pull that up and show you where it says that the thresholds are persons and jobs thresholds and not unit count thresholds?
Actually, the page you just show me for that gross land size, that one already have that.
So sorry, let me pull that up then.
Tab 2 of the, I think, our YRA, I think, a book. Tab 2, you will see that one.
Well,
I believe 148 or something, some page.
Okay, so this is where I'm taking you. This is the H policy, there are thresholds established, and you'd agree with me that these thresholds are persons and jobs or residents and jobs thresholds. They're not unit count thresholds, correct?
Yes.
All right, so let's say you're right, okay? Let's assume you're right. Somehow the city has picked 1,100. It's not reasonable. It should have been 800. You should have more, and that results in more people. Doesn't that just mean you hit these thresholds faster?
Yes.
Right. So what happens is you're going along, development's happening, you hit 10,400. You might have ended up with fewer, more units to get there, but you get there and then you have to have the infrastructure put in that's identified in this table.
I will explain this later. Okay.
Okay, so nothing really turns on the unit count.
Yes, it is. I don't agree with you. Later I will explain.
All right, so I want to take you to the actual unit count analysis. Actually, before I go there, I just want to ask you a question. You'd agree with me that it's not necessarily a given that just because a unit size is smaller, it means you're going to have more people because you have more units. Because we don't know how many persons are going to be in a unit, correct?
We know based on the past history data. Otherwise, how can you plan for those numbers?
Right.
We
but
know.
We're making
Everybody
educated.
knows in the planning department, in the planning as in the field. Every expert knows this.
Well,
Mr. Lee, we're making educated assumptions that there's a particular unit count associated with, for example, a 1-bedroom unit, a 2-bedroom unit, a bachelor unit, a 3-bedroom unit, correct?
Correct. Here we assume,
All right.
we have a document said all 3-bedroom. We assume all 3-bedroom.
Well, just answer the questions.
And Mr. Lee, it could be the case that, bachelor units actually only have 1 person, and a 2-bedroom may end up turning out to be 3 people. And so having 2 bachelor units versus 1 2-bedroom may actually end up with less people. It's possible. You have to admit it's possible, Mr. Lee. Yes or no?
No, because the city said all 3 bedrooms. I can show you the documents.
So let's go to that forecast document. Is this where you want it to go?
Yeah, go to next page. Go to next page, please.
Okay, so we're going to go there in a sec.
Oh, not the next one. Yeah.
Right here.
See the bottom.
Yeah. And this is an important page, actually, Mr. Lee, and I wanted to take you here as well.
Yes.
Because this is the population and job forecast assumption page, isn't it? So this tells you how the city went about calculating total units. So when they figure out there's the 5,080 apartment units here, there's a fairly robust calculation to come to that number, right?
That's why I catch the mistake. That's a very obvious and significant mistake.
Okay, so Mr. Lee, and your concern is the 110 assigned to a unit.
Can you zoom that one? Can you zoom that section? Can you zoom it, please?
Is that down? Can you see it?
Going down a little. Yeah, right. Assume 110, right, per unit.
Right.
For 3-bedroom units. This means that 5,000 units, all for 3 bedrooms.
Right. So
that's a big mistake.
Mr. Lee, let's talk about how they calculated the number of units. So what did they do? Step 1, took the total GFA that's in the Yonge Bernard KDA, right? They went block by block, figured out the site area, applied the FSI, figured out the total GFA, added it all up, came up with a number. You agree with that?
I can tell you the calculation is correct, except that 110. That's it.
All right. Okay. Yeah. So, but I want to walk you through this because, and I'm getting to a point. But you agree with that, right? That's how they calculated. They took the site area, they figured out the GFA, multiply by the FSI, come up with a total number, right?
Yes.
All right. Okay. And then what they do, because they're trying to figure out residents and not residents and jobs for the total units. And you can see here, they take out the non-res GFA.
Yes.
Right? That makes sense. You're not going to count that in unit count. So that goes away.
Yes.
All right. But then you see here what they also did. They carved out the GFA that would be associated with townhouses.
Correct.
Right?
Yes.
And that's because they wouldn't have we'll call it unit size of an apartment dwelling. They'd be much larger than 1,100 square feet, right?
Yes, here this at 200, right? Something like that.
Yeah, and townhouses, yeah, 2,400, right?
Yeah, I didn't check
Square
that.
meters.
That's correct. Correct.
Yeah, yeah. So, and all of those townhouse units would in fact eat up the GFA that you say can be allocated to creating more units, wouldn't they?
Actually, the above all correct until that 110. Can you go?
Okay, so and I will get there, but just bear with me. You agree with me that
yes,
some of that GFA is going to get eaten up by townhouses that are going to use a lot of GFA and maybe not have as many persons per unit.
Yes, I verified the whole calculation, so that's why all correct except that bottom one.
All right, so now let's talk about the actual townhouses. What did they also do with the townhouses? They calculate for the townhouses a percentage that's associated with the common area. And it's about 15%. Because they're assuming...
Mr. Chair, when we're getting into townhouses, this was not part of Mr. Lee's evidence. And I find it strange that a non-expert witness from a residence group is being asked these sorts of questions.
Mr. Chair, I'm raising this because ultimately, Mr. Lee comes to a conclusion about the size of units, and it's important to walk through the calculation to help you understand how that was done.
I too had a question on if you look at the table there, assume 110 square meters policy for 3-bedroom units. It seemed to me that Mr. Lee was taking the 3-bedroom bedroom unit count of 110 and applying it across the board. I just had a question about that. So I'm glad to have this issue clarified for my sake as well.
And also, I want to explain it too. I think it's a great chance.
Mr. Lee, whoa. Let council complete the discussion.
So Mr. Lee, what they do here is they figure out the number of townhouses units. We've counted that already, and they take that out. They minus that number out of the GFA, except for the common area associated with that.
Yes.
Right. And then with the apartment units, they do the same thing. Right? Because they don't actually carve out the common area. So isn't it true that this 110 number per unit is composed of not just the space between the 4 corners of an apartment unit, which could be a 1-bedroom, a 2-bedroom, a 3-bedroom, a bachelor. So that's why the number is partly 110. But it's also composed of the associated common area in the building that's attributable to the unit and the common area that's attributable to the townhouse units. And that's why this number is 110. Isn't that true, Mr. Lee?
You are wrong. Actually, the 15% are being taken out from the calculations. I verified, so you are wrong. The real one, if you account for that common area, this 110 has to go maybe another 20 more. So this net, this 110 net, I can explain why they use 110. Because after the developed area times the FSI, right? They got a total number. After they take out all the common area, townhouse, they still have a number. Let's say 200,000 square meter, right? And then they have a target for the population per unit, 1.9 residents.
Next question, Mr. Carr. Let's get
Thank
there.
you, Mr. Chair. So, Mr. Lee, I wanted to take you. So did you hear in evidence, have you been watching the various witnesses provide evidence over the last few days?
Very little, because I'm a working employee, I have no time.
Okay. All right. So did you hear in evidence at any point that the number for the unit size, and this was from Mr. Lee as well from the city, that the number for the unit size was actually taken from the region? Did you hear that?
I didn't.
All right. So assume that to be true. And I just want to take you to a regional report. You just bear with me here. Okay, so Mr. Lee, do you see this here? Draft guidelines to delineate and set density targets for major transit station areas, York Region long-range planning.
Yeah.
All right, and it's a July 27, 2018 report.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and Mr. Chair, I'm just going to ask for this to be marked as the next exhibit.
Mr. Kahar, could you, it's Mr. Kagan, the keeper of the exhibit list. Can you just tell me exactly what you'd like the title of this exhibit to be?
Mr. Kagan, I suggest it just be called Draft Guidelines to York Region Report Regarding Major Transit Station Area, July 27, 2018.
Got it.
Thank you. All right. So I'm just going to go to page 27 of the report. Do you see that, Mr. Lee?
Yes.
And you see here the regional standard, and it's using that 110 meter squared number for apartment units. Do you see that? Right here on the line where my cursor is pointing?
Yes, but you see that for how many, 2 person, right? And also they probably include the common areas. I mean, that's 15%. I didn't read the notes.
Hang on, Mr. Lee.
So
Wait for
Mr.
the
Lee,
question.
Mr. Lee, you actually went exactly where I was hoping you'd go, which is if you go to point number 4, it says based on this, this is a gross area including common areas such as hallways, lobbies, electrical rooms, and amenities. So when the region is using the 110 number, similar to the way the city is using the 110 number, they're including the common areas, correct?
Incorrect. The 110 we in the city is net. It's already take out 15% because I verified. And also that's for 1.9%. Yeah, for 2%.
Yes, Mr. Lee, he was dealing with this document in front of you.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, to be fair, Mr. Lee's answer was answering the question. He's disagreeing with what Mr. Kahar has put forward.
No. Well, do you want to repeat that question again? I thought it was with respect to the item at the bottom there, which is disappeared from the screen.
Number 4.
Yeah.
Yes.
So maybe I ask the question like this, Mr. Lee, you'd agree that as it relates to the region's number of 110 meters squared, it is a number that is based on not just the size of the unit, but it includes the common areas such as the hallways, lobbies, electrical rooms, and amenities. In this regional document, yes or no?
Regional document is correct, but city used wrong. City misleading. So I will explain later.
Well, he's just asked you a question about the regional document, which is fairly clear on the face of it, I think.
All right. But you'd agree with me that, and I heard your evidence that you think that there is an error in the analysis, but if the tribunal were to find that the unit size of 1,100 square feet included the common areas in the city's analysis, would you agree then that the comparison of that unit to your smaller 800 square foot unit is an unfair comparison because you're comparing one number that calculates the inside of a unit versus another number that includes the inside of the unit and the associated common area. It's apples and oranges, Mr. Lee.
I can tell you the city increased 23% from York region. So the city I will approve later. So it's different. The city didn't use the York region guideline. They misinterpreted.
So Mr. Lee, where in the city's forecasts or in any of its documents does it say that the city's 110 number is a net number and not a gross number? Can you point to anywhere?
So can you repeat the question, please?
So you're saying the 110 number is a net number and not a gross number. And I'm asking you, where in the city documents did you get that information?
Okay, can you show the tab 2 document? Did you just show that gross, I think, land areas? That one, not this one, the other one.
Sorry, let me, right here, right? That's what you're looking for?
Go up. You can see the second one. You see, assume 15% GFA used as building. The second paragraph from the total units down.
Sorry, where is it over here you're talking about?
No, left side. Okay. Next one. Yeah. So here they are removed. Assume 15% of GFA of mixed use building. That means the hallway, the public area, like an elevator area, lobby. So that are removed.
I understand, Mr. Lee. So you read the word here, mixed use building, to mean they are removing the common area in this. Yeah. And you don't read it to mean that this is actually referring to the commercial space in the building, the non-res GFA, like the retail store that might be built in the podium. Is that right, Mr. Lee? That's your interpretation?
I checked a lot of, no, this is different. This basically means the common areas.
Okay, so you read this as common areas, and that's why you conclude that it's already been taken out. That's your evidence. Yes or no?
Yes, this is a comment. I think.
Thank you, Mr. Lee.
Yeah.
All right, Mr. Lee, and you gave some evidence on maximum heights as it relates to policy 3.4.1.39 of the city's official plan in your witness statement, correct?
Yes.
All right, and you'd agree with me that nowhere in the OP does it say that you have to have a numerical maximum height, correct?
And then how can you define the maximum?
Well, Mr. Lee, just as the city has done here, you can control maximum height.
Mr. Chair, I'm going to object to this because he's asking a very broad question about the official plan to a non-expert. I think that's too broad, to be fair.
I can't get in. See. Mr. Carr?
Okay.
Height, he did cover the height issue, though.
It was specifically the question about anywhere in the official plan does it say there has to be a numerical limit? Because that's something for legal argument, I submit.
Well, I can ask Mr. Lee if he's aware of whether there's a numerical limit anywhere in the official plan, and you can answer that question. Mr. Lee, are you aware of a numerical limit anywhere in the official plan?
By common knowledge.
Sorry, what was your answer?
What was that?
As an engineer, I know minimum maximum means some numbers. Otherwise, how can you define?
No. The question was simpler than that one.
Mr. Lee, are you aware of a numerical maximum in the city's official plan that applies to this area? Yes or no?
I didn't check the official plan, but that's general. Official plan didn't specify each individual development block. Remember?
So your answer is, I'm not aware.
I know we have a requirement for minimum maximum.
All right. Mr. Lee, you're aware the city of Richmond Hill has an in effect parkland dedication bylaw, correct? You referenced it in your witness statement, a parkland dedication bylaw.
Yes,
Right. And that a bylaw applies citywide? Applies across the city, including the KDA?
I think so.
Right. And it would require a development application to either provide a physical parkland dedication or a payment in lieu, a cash payment,
Yes,
right? And that bylaw itself is in effect. It's not before the tribunal today, correct?
yes,
All right. And that bylaw would give the city the ability to request from developers a cash payment or a physical parkland contribution associated with their development application, right? It's generally how it works.
yes,
Right. And you recognize that there are linear parks shown in the secondary plan. They're there. They're not as much as what I think you've said in your evidence. It's not enough, but they're there. Correct?
if you see 3% as Toronto, that's enough. I have no objection.
Right. And you recognize there's policy inside the secondary plan that requires for the provision of publicly accessible private open spaces. There's policy that requires POPs, right?
I'm not aware.
So you're not aware of the policy that requires, for example, urban plazas to be provided?
So I didn't go to that details for that part.
I understood. So you're not aware that in addition to what's shown on the schedule showing the linear parks, there's also stuff that we'll call it is not shown on that schedule, but will materialize as park and rec space by virtue of developers providing privately owned, publicly accessible place or urban plazas. There's more parkland.
Because the total land already decided, only that much left. So you don't have only 1 or 2 hectares, that's it. So what you can manipulate?
Right. So you didn't account for any of that in giving your opinions on the amount of parkland being provided.
Even if I found
secondary
that not enough, I can tell you, those
Right.
part I think can be ignored. It's too small.
Right. And you have no knowledge or information on how much publicly owned private space may be provided through various development applications, correct?
I know because I have some other reference. Usually 10 to 30% of the high developed land, high density development, 10 to 30%. Later I will show evidence.
All right. And Mr. Lee, I note in your witness statement, one of the concerns you raised was regarding the rail crossing at Elgin Mills. I think you said there's that creates a significant traffic issue in your evidence in oral testimony, correct?
Yes, yes.
All right. And you understand that one of the regional projects to be completed based on the thresholds in the H is a rail crossing or grade separation in that location. So there's a solution to fix the problem, right?
But what time they can complete, that's the issue.
All right, and Mr. Lee, you recognize that it is one of the items that has to be done before you go over 3.0 FSI or 10,000, and I forgot the 100 number, persons and jobs combined per hectare.
The reality right now, without even increase 1 resident, we already have a lot of issues. That's a proposal, I know, yes.
All right. And finally, you raised a concern in your oral testimony regarding the number of collisions in a specified area. And I think it was bound by Elgin Mills, Yonge, Yorkland, and Silverwood. You recall that?
Yes.
And that's an area that's larger than the KDA, obviously.
Basically, I want to show the trains. I want to show, because it's difficult to get exactly the KDA. That's why the majority is the KDA. I want to show this area, the traffic accident. So that means the trains. So it means they keep going up.
Okay. And you're aware that traffic safety can be addressed by a number of means?
Of course.
Right. And that would include, for example, you could reduce the speed on the roads. That could make roads safer, right?
Yes,
or no?
but right now the reality, they keep going up.
Right. And the city, for example, can install red light cameras, and that can make the road safer.
That's assistant, not a significant approval.
All right. And the city could add countdown signals for pedestrians, and that can make the road safer.
Of course, you have a lot
Right.
of measurements, but
And-
it's still keep going up.
Right. And the city could install or implement road safety reviews to make the road safer, correct?
The problem is the traffic volume is not because we have no enough safety measurements.
Mr. Chair, I have no further questions.
So, other council? Any questions?
Sir, it's Mr. Kagan. I just want to advise you, I don't have any questions for this witness.
Okay. Anyone else out there?
Mr.
Thank you, sir. I
Annabelle, sorry, Ms. Bourne, go ahead.
I was going to confirm I do not. Mr. Kahar in particular has covered my questions.
Okay.
And
Mr. Annabelle?
Same for me, sir. Thank you.
Okay.
Nothing from the region either.
Anyone else? Mr. Cherniak, are you ready to go, or do you want a break right now? Hey,
I would appreciate a 10-minute break, please.
well, you got 15.
Oh, thank you.